The boardroom fell silent as I announced my pregnancy. 23 pairs of eyes stared at me across the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from surprise to barely concealed disappointment. I was 6 months pregnant, showing just enough that loose blazers couldn't hide it anymore, and I'd just been offered the position I'd worked toward for 8 years, Chief Technology Officer of Meridian Industries. "Congratulations, Cecilia," CEO Richard Blackwood said, his smile tight as a funeral director's. "This is unexpected timing." Unexpected. As if pregnancy was something that happened to women without planning, without consideration for corporate convenience. I placed my hands on the table, steadying myself against what I knew was coming. "Thank you, Richard. I'm excited to take on this role and lead our digital transformation initiative." My voice remained professional, but inside, I was calculating. The way their faces had changed when I made my announcement told me everything I needed to know. The congratulations felt hollow, the handshakes perfunctory. I'd spent 3 months preparing for this moment, documenting every interaction, recording every meeting where I'd presented the strategies that would now be implemented under my leadership. What I hadn't prepared for was the immediate shift in temperature once my pregnancy became impossible to hide. After the meeting, I sat in my current office, looking out at the city skyline, one hand resting on my growing belly. My son kicked, as if sensing the tension. Marcus, my husband, had wanted me to wait until after the birth to take on such a demanding role. Think about the stress, cease. Think about the baby. But I'd worked too hard, proven too much, to let this opportunity slip away. The CTO position wasn't just a job, it was validation of every late night, every presentation, every time I'd been the only woman in the room and still the smartest person there. My assistant, Janet, knocked on my door. "Cecilia, Richard wants to see you in his office." The walk down the hall felt longer than usual. Richard's corner office screamed power, floor-to-ceiling windows, awards lining the walls, a desk the size of my first apartment. He gestured to the chair across from him, the same chair where I'd pitched the blockchain integration project that had saved the company $50 million. "Cecilia, I want to be direct with you," he began, leaning back in his leather chair. "We're thrilled about your pregnancy, of course. But I have concerns about the timing of this promotion." Here it was. The conversation I'd been dreading but expecting. "What kind of concerns, Richard?" "Well, the CTO role requires extensive travel, long hours, high-stress decision-making. With a baby on the way." He spread his hands as if the conclusion was obvious. "Perhaps we should consider a modified timeline. Maybe revisit this opportunity after you've settled into motherhood." Motherhood. As if becoming a mother would somehow diminish my technical expertise, erase my MBA, or make me forget how to code. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but my pregnancy doesn't affect my ability to perform the job functions we discussed. I can travel until 34 weeks, and after that, we have video conferencing technology that I helped implement." Richard's smile was patronizing. Of course. But think about the team dynamics. The late-night crisis calls, the weekend emergencies. Your priorities will naturally shift once the baby arrives." My priorities. Not might shift, would shift. As if having a child meant I'd suddenly become incapable of professional judgment. "Richard, I've been managing crisis situations here for 5 years. I was the one who resolved the security breach last Christmas Eve while everyone else was with their families. I've never let personal circumstances interfere with my responsibilities." "That's exactly my point," he said, leaning forward. "Christmas Eve. You won't have that flexibility once you're a mother. The team needs to know their leader is available, focused, committed." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't concern for my well-being, this was doubt about my commitment. Doubt that had never existed before I started showing. "I see," I said quietly. "So what are you proposing?" "I think we should bring in Tom Davidson as interim CTO. Just temporarily, you understand, while you focus on preparing for the baby. After your maternity leave, we can reassess." Tom Davidson. The man who'd spent the last 3 years implementing my ideas and taking credit for them. The man who'd never written a line of code in his life but had somehow positioned himself as the department's technical visionary. Tom doesn't have the technical background for this role, Richard. He's never led a development team, never architected a system, never. He's shown excellent leadership potential, Richard interrupted. And he won't have any distractions over the next year. Distractions. My unborn child was now officially a distraction. I stood up, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. I need some time to consider this. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Cecilia. He stood too, walking around his desk to face me. I hope you understand this comes from a place of caring. We want what's best for you and the baby. Walking back to my office, I felt the familiar burn of rage mixed with determination. It was the same feeling I'd had in college when my computer science professor suggested I might be happier in the education program. The same feeling when my first boss asked if I was sure I could handle the mathematical aspects of software development. But this time was different. This time, I had something they didn't expect: documentation. That night, I sat in my home office surrounded by printed emails, recorded conversations, and detailed notes I'd been keeping for months. Marcus found me there at midnight, glasses perched on my nose, highlighter in hand. "Babe, you should be sleeping. The baby needs rest. The baby needs a mother who fights for what's right," I said, not looking up from the employment law statute I was reading. Marcus sat down beside me, taking in the papers scattered across the desk. "What is all this?" "Evidence." I pulled up a recording on my laptop. "Listen to this." It was from a board meeting 3 months ago, before I was showing, before anyone knew about the pregnancy. Richard's voice came through clearly. "Cecilia White is the most qualified candidate for CTO we've ever had. Her vision for our digital future is exactly what we need to stay competitive." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "This is from when?" "March 15th. Before the pregnancy announcement." I clicked another file. "And this is from yesterday." Richard's voice again, but different now. "We need someone who can be fully committed to the role, without personal complications." The contrast was stark. Same job, same qualifications, different circumstances, and suddenly I was a risk instead of an asset. "Cease, what are you planning to do with all this?" I leaned back in my chair, feeling the baby stretch inside me. "I'm going to show them exactly what a pregnant woman can accomplish when she's motivated." The next morning, I requested a meeting with the entire executive team. Not just Richard, but the CFO, the heads of sales and marketing, the board members. I scheduled it for the same conference room where I'd announced my pregnancy, where I'd watched their congratulations turn to concern in real time. I arrived early, setting up my laptop and checking my presentation one final time. The slides were clean, professional, devastating. I'd spent the weekend pulling together every metric that mattered: productivity numbers, client satisfaction scores, project completion rates, revenue generated by my initiatives. They filed in looking curious but relaxed. Richard took his usual seat at the head of the table, Tom Davidson beside him like a eager deputy. I noticed Tom had already started carrying a leather portfolio, playing the part of executive-in-waiting. "Good morning, everyone," I began, clicking to my first slide. "I want to discuss the CTO transition and address some concerns that have been raised about my pregnancy affecting my ability to lead." A few uncomfortable shifts around the table. Sarah Martinez, the CFO, looked genuinely interested. She'd fought her own battles climbing the corporate ladder. "As you can see," I continued, clicking to a graph showing our department's performance over the past 2 years, "my team has consistently exceeded targets throughout my pregnancy. Our productivity hasn't declined, it's increased by 18% since January. More shifting." Richard's jaw was tightening. Furthermore, I clicked to the next slide. "The projects I've spearheaded while pregnant have generated over $200 million in new revenue. The blockchain integration alone has positioned us ahead of our competitors by at least 2 years." I could see the board members taking notes, their expressions shifting from polite attention to genuine interest. "Now, I understand there are concerns about my ability to travel and manage crisis situations." Click. "Here's my availability record for the past 6 months, including weekends and holidays." 100% response rate to emergency calls, including the server failure I resolved from my doctor's office waiting room. Tom was no longer looking confident. His portfolio sat closed in front of him. I also want to address the suggestion that Tom Davidson take over as interim CTO. I clicked to a comparison chart that made my stomach flutter with nervous energy. While Tom has many strengths, his technical background differs significantly from mine. The understatement of the year. Tom's technical background consisted of a business degree and 3 years of repeating my recommendations in executive meetings. For instance, I continued, pulling up code samples on the screen, the architecture for our new customer portal, which Tom has been presenting to clients, was designed entirely by my team. Tom's role was project management, not technical leadership. Richard was leaning forward now, his face darkening. Cecilia, I'm not sure this comparison is relevant. I interrupted smoothly. I think it's very relevant when we're discussing who should lead our technical operations. I clicked to the next slide. Here's a breakdown of problem resolution times under my leadership versus industry standards. We're performing at the 95th percentile. Sarah Martinez spoke up. These numbers are impressive, Cecilia. What's your plan for maintaining this performance during maternity leave? Finally, someone asking the right questions instead of making assumptions. I'm glad you asked. I clicked to my transition plan. I've developed a comprehensive knowledge transfer system, cross-trained key team members, and created decision trees for common scenarios. Most importantly, I'll remain available for consultation on critical issues. Available how? Richard challenged. You'll be caring for a newborn. The same way I was available when I had pneumonia last year and still resolved the data breach from my hospital bed. The same way I was available during my honeymoon when the payment system went down. Leadership isn't about physical presence, it's about expertise, judgment, and commitment. I paused, letting that sink in. None of which is diminished by pregnancy. The room was quiet except for the sound of pens on paper as board members continued taking notes. I have one more item to address, I said, clicking to a slide that contained just one sentence. Discrimination based on pregnancy is illegal under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone here has discriminated against me, I continued, my voice calm and professional. But I want to ensure we're all clear on the legal framework surrounding pregnancy and employment. Companies that make personnel decisions based on pregnancy status face significant liability. Richard's face was red now. Cecilia, no one is discriminating. Of course not, I agreed. Which is why I'm confident the board will support moving forward with my promotion as originally planned. After all, it was merit-based decision, wasn't it? I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. Sarah Martinez was smiling slightly. The head of sales, David Kim, was nodding. Even the usually silent board members looked convinced. I propose we implement the CTO transition immediately, I continued. I'll begin the digital transformation initiative next week, continue through my pregnancy, and return from maternity leave to a department positioned for unprecedented growth. I closed my laptop. Any questions? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Sarah spoke up. I think Cecilia has made a compelling case. The numbers don't lie, and her track record speaks for itself. David Kim nodded. Agreed. I've worked with Cecilia on the client-facing technology initiatives. She's the most competent technical leader we have. One by one, voices around the table expressed support. Not because they felt sorry for the pregnant woman, but because the data was undeniable. I hadn't asked for special accommodation. I'd proven I was the best person for the job, pregnancy and all. Richard sat silent through the impromptu vote. When it became clear the room supported me, he managed a tight smile. Well then. Congratulations, Chief Technology Officer White. This time, the congratulations felt real. That afternoon, I was setting up my new office when Tom Davidson appeared in my doorway. Gone was the confident demeanor he'd worn for the past week. He looked deflated, uncertain. Cecilia, can I talk to you for a minute? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Tom sat down, fidgeting with his portfolio. I want you to know, he began hesitantly, I didn't ask for the interim position. Richard approached me. I know, I said simply. And I realize now that I'm not qualified for this role. Not the way you are. It took courage to admit that, especially for someone who'd spent years posturing as a technical expert. Tom, you have skills, I said honestly. Project management, client relations, strategic thinking. Those are valuable. But they're different from technical leadership. He nodded, looking relieved. What happens now? I mean, where does this leave me? That depends. Are you interested in working with the actual technical team, learning the systems from the ground up? Or do you want to continue pretending you understand architecture you didn't design? His face flushed, but he didn't argue. I'd like to learn. If you're willing to teach. I'm always willing to teach people who are willing to learn. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the baby move. But Tom, no more taking credit for other people's work. No more presenting solutions you don't understand. If you want to be part of this team, you contribute honestly. Deal, he said quickly. And Cecilia? I'm sorry. About the assumptions, about positioning myself as a replacement. It wasn't right. After he left, I sat alone in my new office, looking out at the city skyline from a higher floor than before. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did it go? I'll tell you tonight, I replied. But the baby is going to have a CTO for a mother. The next few months passed in a blur of strategic planning and implementation. My team responded to my leadership with enthusiasm that surprised even me. When they saw that I wasn't going to disappear or become distracted by pregnancy, they rallied around our shared vision. The digital transformation initiative launched ahead of schedule and under budget. Our customer satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. The industry press took notice, featuring our innovations in 3 major publications. At 34 weeks pregnant, I gave my final presentation before maternity leave to a room of investors who'd flown in specifically to hear about our technical capabilities. Standing behind the podium, visibly pregnant and undeniably competent, I walked them through the systems that would keep us competitive for the next decade. Questions? I asked at the end. An older gentleman in the front row raised his hand. Ms. White, this is impressive work. Who's going to maintain this vision while you're out? The same team that's been implementing it, I replied. Pregnancy doesn't erase institutional knowledge or team capability. We've built systems, not dependencies. Another investor spoke up. What about long-term? How do we know the technical leadership will remain consistent? I smiled, resting my hand on my belly. Because I'll be back. And because we've proven that excellence isn't contingent on any single person's availability at any given moment. It's built into our processes, our culture, and our commitment to innovation. After the presentation, Richard approached me. The tension that had marked our interactions for months was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect. Cecilia, I owe you an apology. For what specifically? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. For assuming pregnancy would make you less capable. For suggesting Tom as a replacement when you clearly were and are the right person for this job. And for not recognizing that my concerns were based on outdated assumptions rather than evidence. I studied his face, looking for the sincerity behind the words. Richard, I appreciate that. But I hope you apply that lesson beyond just me. The next pregnant employee shouldn't have to prove herself the way I did. You're right. We're implementing new policies around pregnancy and advancement. Sarah Martinez is heading up the committee. Good. Sarah would make sure the policies had teeth. One more thing, Richard said. The board voted to extend your maternity leave to 6 months, fully paid, with the option to work from home part-time when you're ready. That's generous, but unnecessary. The standard leave policy is fine. It's not about necessity. It's about recognizing what you've contributed and making sure we don't lose your leadership to competitors who might offer better family support. Fair enough. They were learning. I went into labor on a Tuesday morning, appropriately during a video conference with our development team in Singapore. As the contractions intensified, I calmly finished the meeting, handed off my immediate responsibilities to Janet, and drove myself to the hospital. Marcus met me there, frantic and apologetic for missing the early signs. "I thought you were just focused on work," he said, helping me out of the car. I was focused on work, I laughed through a contraction. Right up until this little guy decided it was time to meet his mom. 18 hours later, James Marcus White arrived, screaming his displeasure at the world and gripping my finger with surprising strength. As I held him for the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected, not just love, but fierce protectiveness and an even stronger determination to create a world where his achievements would be measured by merit alone. The hospital room filled with flowers from colleagues, including a massive arrangement from the development team with a note, "Welcome to the world, future CTO." My favorite gift came from Tom Davidson, a programming book titled Python for Beginners with a note that read, "In case he wants to follow in mom's footsteps. I'm starting with the basics too." 6 weeks into maternity leave, I was working from home part-time, taking conference calls between feedings and debugging code while James napped on my chest. The flexibility was everything, not because I couldn't handle the full workload, but because I could structure my days around both professional excellence and new motherhood. The knock on my door came at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. I was expecting the pediatric Ian for James's checkup, but instead found a reporter from Tech Weekly standing on my porch. "Ms. White. I'm Jennifer Park. I'd like to talk to you about your article." "What article?" "The one about pregnancy discrimination in tech that was published this morning. It's going viral." I stared at her, confused. "I haven't written any articles." She pulled out her phone, showing me a piece titled "The Code of Motherhood: How One CTO Debugged Corporate Bias," published under my name. "I didn't write this," I said, scanning the text. But as I read, I realized someone had taken my board presentation, my documented experiences, and crafted them into a powerful expose of pregnancy discrimination in corporate America. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." Jennifer Park sat in my living room, James sleeping peacefully in his bouncer between us, while she explained what had happened. "Someone leaked your presentation materials to TechCrunch. They were so compelling that 3 major publications picked up the story. Your experience has sparked a national conversation about pregnancy bias in tech leadership." She showed me her phone screen, scrolling through hundreds of comments from women sharing similar experiences. The hashtag #pregnant&capable was trending. "Who leaked it?" "The source is anonymous, but the documents came through your assistant, Janet Morrison." "Janet?" My loyal assistant who'd watched me fight for months to be taken seriously, who'd seen the meetings where Tom was positioned as my replacement, who'd probably grown tired of watching talented women diminished by pregnancy. "Ms. White, I'd like to interview you about the systemic issues you faced. This story is resonating with women across the industry." I looked at James, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos his mother had apparently unleashed. "Let me call my lawyer first." 2 hours later, after consulting with both my attorney and Marcus, I agreed to the interview. But I had conditions. I would focus on systemic issues, not personal grievances. I would discuss solutions, not just problems. And I would make it clear that my fight wasn't just for myself, but for every woman who'd been told pregnancy makes her less capable. The interview ran as a cover story the following week. The photo showed me at my home office, James in my arms, code visible on the computer screen behind us. The headline, "Debugging Discrimination: How Motherhood Made Me a Better Leader." The response was overwhelming. Women from around the world shared their stories of pregnancy discrimination. Companies began reaching out, asking for consultation on family-friendly policies. Speaking invitations poured in. But the most satisfying response came from Richard Blackwood. He called personally to tell me that Meridian Industries had been approached by 3 major clients who specifically wanted to work with us because of our progressive leadership approach to working mothers. "Turns out," he said, "supporting pregnant employees isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business." I returned to work when James was 12 weeks old, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The office had been transformed in my absence, a lactation room installed next to my office, flexible work policies codified, and a new mentorship program for women in technical roles. My first day back, I found a gift on my desk, a framed photo from the team showing our productivity metrics from my maternity leave. Despite my partial absence, we'd exceeded every target. Tom Davidson knocked on my office door as I was settling in. "Welcome back, boss," he said, grinning. "How's it feel to be a working mom?" "The same way it felt to be a working woman," I replied. "Challenging, rewarding, and occasionally exhausting." "Fair enough. Ready for the Johnson presentation tomorrow?" I looked at my calendar, then at the photo of James on my desk, then at the code architecture diagrams covering my whiteboard. "Tom, I've been ready my whole career. Pregnancy didn't change that, it just made everyone else realize it." 6 months later, I stood on the stage at the National Women in Technology Conference, looking out at an audience of 1,500 women. In the front row, Sarah Martinez sat with her 3-month-old daughter. In the back, I spotted Janet, who'd been promoted to executive assistant to the CEO. When I announced my pregnancy in that boardroom, I watched 23 faces change from congratulation to concern in real time. They weren't worried about my health or happiness, they were worried about their investment in my career. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the audience. But here's what they didn't understand: pregnancy doesn't diminish capability, it reveals character. It shows who you really are when the stakes are highest and the challenges are greatest. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of James at my computer, tiny fingers reaching for the keyboard. My son is 6 months old now, and he's already learning that excellence isn't gender-specific, that leadership isn't conditional on life circumstances, and that the most powerful code you can write is the one that debugs bias in the systems around you. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. As the applause died down, I saw faces in the audience: young women, pregnant women, working mothers, women who'd been told they had to choose between family and career. "The question isn't whether pregnant women can lead," I concluded. "The question is whether companies are smart enough to recognize that the same qualities that create great mothers, strategic thinking, crisis management, multitasking under pressure, and fierce protectiveness of what matters most, also create exceptional leaders." After the conference, I flew home to find Marcus and James waiting at the airport. James had grown so much in the 2 days I'd been gone, his face more alert, his grip stronger. "How did it go?" Marcus asked, taking my briefcase while I scooped up our son. "Life-changing," I said honestly. "I think we might have started something." "We?" I looked at James, who was studying my face with the serious expression that reminded me so much of myself when I was debugging a particularly complex problem. "This little guy and me. We're going to make sure the next generation of women doesn't have to choose between motherhood and leadership." That night, after James was asleep and Marcus was grading papers for his college classes, I sat in my home office reading emails from women who'd attended the conference. Stories of pregnancy discrimination, tales of career advancement despite motherhood, requests for mentorship and advice. One email stood out, from a software engineer in Seattle who was 7 months pregnant and facing pressure to step back from a leadership role. "I've been following your story," she wrote. "Yesterday, my manager suggested I might want to consider a less demanding position after the baby arrives. I thought about what you said about debugging bias in systems. Tomorrow, I'm going to document everything and fight back. Thank you for showing me that pregnancy is not a professional disability." I typed my response carefully. "Remember, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're debugging the system for every woman who comes after you. The code you write tomorrow determines the programs that run for the next generation." As I hit send, James stirred in his crib down the hall. I went to check on him, finding him awake but content, staring at the mobile of planets and stars that slowly rotated above his bed. "Hey, little man," I whispered, picking him up. "Ready to change the world?" He gripped my finger with that same determined strength he'd shown since birth. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled like lines of code, each one representing a decision, a possibility, a future we could build together. I had spent months fighting to prove that pregnancy didn't diminish my capabilities. But sitting there in the quiet darkness, holding my son and planning the initiatives that would reshape corporate culture, I realized the truth was even more powerful. Pregnancy hadn't diminished anything. It had amplified everything that made me a leader and given me a reason to lead that transcended any individual achievement. I wasn't just building systems anymore, I was building a future. And that code would run for generations. If this story of transformation and triumph resonated with you, remember that every woman deserves to be valued for her capabilities, not limited by life circumstances. Cecilia's journey shows us that excellence isn't diminished by motherhood, it's redefined by it. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that they don't have to choose between family and leadership. They can debug the system and have it all.